My name's Kaelee Cornell. I am a current realtor extraordinaire here in Sacramento County and co-host to this fabulous guy to my right, Dan.
I'm Dan Marashi I'm a partner with Finley Home Services. We do pest control and then a lot of real estate services, general construction, and inspections.
And together we host another podcast called Open the Gate. So I've actually been an agent since 2018. I just could never sell because I was with the title company and it's a conflict of interest in California. But honestly, one of the impetuses was this challenged market. The more I hear people complaining about how hard it is, the more I see people focusing more on the negative and the climate of the industry rather than the opportunity. As we all know, millionaires are made in down markets. Yeah. And to me, what I understand of this industry, being in it for the last 8 years, whether it's good, whether it's bad, it doesn't stop moving. There's always somewhere to find great opportunities. So if you put your head down, block out the noise, then you can do pretty well for yourself. I think I've done pretty great for a new agent. I just closed my 8th deal, so I'm almost tracking one a month right now. Nice. And yeah, I'm loving it.
Kaylee's being so nice because when I asked her that question off record, no recording and no camera, she's like, because I'm tired of telling people what they need to do to be successful, only to watch them not do it.
So frustrating.
You know, and I think that like that's the one thing with the Open the Gate podcast, like we just want that kind of like transparency, and we're not trying to offend anybody. We're not going to name drop and belittle anybody, but at the same time, like in the vein of success leaves clues and things like that, like I'm all about the consistency and showing up at work and you plan your work and you work your plan, right? That's one of my greatest like sales coaches ever said. He's like, just plan it and then work the plan. And it's not that hard when you do that. So many people, especially in really tough markets like this one currently, it's just so easy to stare at the pile of S that's in the corner instead of just starting to shovel it out of the way. We talk about one bite at a time. That's how you eat an elephant, right? Like you're never going to make any progress. And yeah, sure, it's a huge mountain of crap in front of you, but you just got to start chipping away at it. And that's this market really from our conversations, it just leads so much to that. Like you can make a huge dent in something just by being diligent.
I agree 1,000%. And I love that you said it like, no, being hard didn't keep me away. It inspired me to go get involved, which I tell new agents this when I talk to, new agents is if you can make it in this market, you can make it in any market.
Yep.
Exactly.
So go out there and hone your skills and become a great agent in the hardest market that we've seen in a couple decades. Then when things open up, rates come down, we go from 4 million transactions to 5. Like it will just be phenomenal. What's happened to a lot of agents, unfortunately, if they've done the reverse. They started in a really easy market. Like everyone's buying. Rates are 3%.
That summer of 2020 market was just ripe for inviting bad habits.
Yeah, it spoiled a lot of people.
100%. And you can't say it any different. Like, hard times make hard people, and that's the stuff that makes you successful. It's easy when you roll out of bed in the morning and you answer your phone and you got deals happening. It's easy,
right?
And it's easy to let off the gas or to just fall into those bad habits. And then when it comes to times like we're in today, you got to make your 100 phone calls or your 50 contacts or whatever you're doing to fuel your business, and it's just not worth it to a lot of people because it used to come so easy. But if you look at the top 5, even 10% every year, there's not a lot of fluctuation in those names, whether it be a team or an individual.
Not by accident.
Or an individual. Michael Jordan worked his way to greatness, and Kobe Bryant, like those guys, the standards were so high, but the work that they were doing behind the scenes was making sure that they were outworking everybody else. And there's no question as to why they were winning continuous MVPs and accolades and championships and things like that.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because I get people, I'm very transparent about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And I will have people tell me, Kaelee, don't give away all your secrets. And I'm like, I've been doing that for 7 years. And nobody did shit with it. Like, do you think I'm worried now all of a sudden? Yeah. So it is very liberating. Yeah. Thanks for calling me out. I was very done at my wit's end with pouring into people, giving them a path to success, like really pouring myself into them and making a specific and unique plan to help them get business. And literally all they had to do was take action, like do the actual work.
And I want to dig into the specific action you're taking just so the audience understands too. When you talk about pouring in and adding value, you were on the title side.
Yes.
And as a title agent, you're like, I don't want to just ask you to send me business. I want to add value to you as a real estate agent.
I want to help you get business.
Let me help you get business.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like you said, 98 of 100 people don't take any of the action. And they're like, I wonder why I sold 4 homes this year, just like 4 homes last year and 4 homes the year before. I haven't changed anything.
Yeah.
Why hasn't anything changed?
Oh, and by the way, to set that meeting, I can't even buy your coffee.
Let's meet a coffee.
Matt, we could buy the coffee. We could buy the lunch. We could buy the cocktails. It's all good. Like, but man, the red tape in that industry makes it really, really challenging.
It really was golden handcuffs.
But people want to hear. I want to hear. What are you doing specifically? Because anybody who is not around real estate, especially California real estate, we're in 48 states in at U Mortgage, and like California is one of the toughest to get business in this current market. So what are you doing where out of the gate, you're like, you know what, I'm going to start selling real estate, and you've proven that, you're doing a good job and getting deals across the finish line.
Yeah.
What's led to that?
It's really about momentum. I think I understood fully that I needed to focus and not take a stand. Like, I canceled vacations. I gave myself 90 days. I'm like, I'm going to work every single day and I'm going to get an escrow before my 90 days. I made it to day 45, got my first escrow. But I had identified my 3 areas. I think one of the biggest challenges we as realtors have is there's so many things you can do. You can pay for leads, you can do this. And we're always watching to see what works for everyone else. And so we get distracted by that shiny thing. We don't stick to 1 or 2 things long enough to really see the results. So I knew I had 3 buckets. It was going to be my sphere, reaching out to everybody that already knew, loved, and trusted me, open houses, and door knocking, which people are like, oh my God, you door knock? I can never do that. I freaking love it. I get invited into people's houses. I should probably be more cautious with that, but I know it's like people are so proud to show off their homes to me, and it creates such a wonderful connection and authentic relationship with people. I haven't had anybody slam their door in my face or tell me to F off, if they either they don't answer or they're just very quick.
That's because you look like you.
I know. You know,
like Matt and I.
It would be hard, dude. But yeah, I just break them down with a smile and just keep talking and asking questions about them, and eventually they open right up, and people love talking about themselves.
Well, there's something to be said there too, because I know, real estate and mortgage goes hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we're talking to the same people in tough economic times, in times of uncertainty. People are scared. Mm-hmm. And so they're scared to talk. They're scared to let you in. Once you show them like, hey, I'm truly here to help, not like the government, like I'm really here to help.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, government.
Great analogy.
You don't got a good track record as of late. But, I'm sure, like, as you're saying it, I can imagine, somebody who's like, you know what, like, I really do need to downsize. I really need to talk to somebody about what would it look like if I sold that house and bought the next one. And you come and you're knocking on 50 doors. You're obviously not afraid of hard work. That can break down some of those walls and get you into those homes.
Well, I think what Kaelee said too, like the coming from contribution, obviously that's huge. But the other thing, she chose the 3 things for her buckets that were always going to put wind in her sails. Mm-hmm. Those people that are terrified or reluctant about door knocking should not choose door knocking, because you're not going to get out of bed to go do something that you love. Kaelee's different. That's something she likes. I bet you she hates cold calling. She's probably not picking. She's probably got no interest.
An asshole over the phone.
She's probably got no interest in in subscribing to a dialing system that's going to make the phone calls for her, or get them connected and ease of operation, all that. She'd much rather just go meet people face to face. So picking what works for you is so massively important.
Find your strengths. Do what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, for sure. But everyone's, and I want to keep, kind of pulling on this string because it's a good one in 2024. Everyone's afraid because things have changed. And now, with the, God, I'm so sick and tired of hearing myself even talk about
the NAR lawsuit
settlement and da-da-da-da-da. But unfortunately,
we should talk about affordability instead.
Let's talk about it all.
Another rare subject.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, like, and this is crazy. I went to a real estate meeting 2 weeks ago, and I told Elise, who runs that Midtown meeting, let me be a moderator and let's do some role play. and have somebody be a buyer, have somebody be a seller. Bring these hard questions to realtors and force them to role play. Bless a lot of my friends in that meeting, and really all the realtor friends that I have, they're not ready. And what makes it even worse is I don't think they're practicing to get better at it.
Yeah.
Like you don't hit home runs by never swinging a friggin' baseball bat.
You can't run a marathon without running a couple
It kills me when I hear people say like, oh, I don't like scripting. I don't like, and I'm like, everything we say in life is a script. You know, when somebody says, hey, how are you? You say, I'm fine, thanks. That's a script. When somebody says, I love you, you say, I love you back. Like these are the practice, rehearsed scripts that we say that have become natural over time. Why wouldn't you want to practice overcoming some of the toughest questions you're going to get that lead to your business?
But I think that's
you say
where,
like a pro.
I think that's where kind of our industry kind of got in trouble. Even speaking to the NAR ruling, you know, when you call it a script, it sounds so much more predetermined. But really, you're just if it's a sharing or an educating based on your personal experiences, that sounds a lot more like, you know, on the up and up than, oh, well, this guy called and this was their
script.
This is the one I've used to sell 10,000 homes, you know.
And for me is really a structure to know what to say and how to say it genuinely and confidently. Like obviously I'm not going to read lines off of paper. Eventually I'm going to make it my own. But if I can give someone an answer to help, you know, resolve their fears, then now we're moving forward. Right? People are fearful because they don't know anything.
The hard part too is like you start playing the semantics game. Like, right? We can describe what a script is 75 different ways. At the end of the day, it's still a script. That connotation that's tied to it happens to be fairly negative in the real estate space right now. If they're using scripts, like people start thinking about manipulation. People start thinking about all these things that have negative connotation to them. When in actuality, no, like I'm trying to help. I've always said like, in this industry, in our world, like there's someone who wants to buy a house and someone who wants to sell a house. And then there's all of us, all the professionals that work in between. You know what we want? We want to make a couple bucks and we want to not get sued.
Professional matchmakers. I
mean, that's just it. So, but what happens is a lot of times those professionals that are in the middle get overly involved or assert too much of their own needs or, you know, need basis and things like that. And that's when things start getting out of whack. Like we got to remember, someone wants to buy a house, someone wants to sell a house, and our job is to help facilitate that process.
Yeah, which exactly to your point, what I'm finding right now, I'm like a non-biased third party. I'm just the mortgage guy here, but I'm just in the middle of some of these real estate agent conversations, negotiations, transactions. And I'm like, guys, we're on the same freaking team. Like, let's talk about this. And we're 3 weeks in, Kaelee, to this, you know, new way of doing business, even though some brokerages started it earlier. What I think you mentioned education, Dan, that's all it is. Is like, as real estate agents, as professionals, we got to educate the average consumer. The average consumer is so freaking confused.
Right.
I saw this on TV. I don't got to pay the buy side agent. I don't even know what that means, but I'm saving money somehow. Tell me again where I'm saving. And so if the real estate agent community is able to, as a community, educate people so that they understand, oh, I get it. So I can, and it's negotiable. I don't have to. But, you know,
that's
my
always
agent,
been the case.
Right. My agent like educated me and showed me the data that 95% of the time they do pay a buy side commission because there's something with, you know, incentivizing somebody to bring me the highest offer and all
that's always been a part of the game, right? I mean, why does Nike have commercials? Right? Why do these companies offer coupons or discounts and things like that?
Yeah. You're going to get $4 less for your sneakers, but you'll never see a Nike.
I think one of the things that really made this new ruling and these new rules really hard was, one, how fast they came about.
Yeah.
And two, it was kind of like it was almost like infighting, like the realtors versus their own association. It was like NAR was like making these decisions that so many of their members felt like they didn't have a voice in, and these decisions were just being made. And I guess that probably happens in unions and all kinds of different organizations. But at the same time, like, it felt like that divide was way bigger than a 50-50 split, where there was it seemed like a small portion of that membership was really making those decisions. And now we're kind of seeing the fallout from it. With all the questions and, you know, and additional forms and
right. And realtors honestly were painted as villains. I mean, that's how they wrote it. It's like there's price fixing.
And that's really hard because NAR was the one leading the charge.
Yeah.
And it was like, hold on a second.
And what the consumer is getting out of this, like I received something in the mail that I felt to be really misleading. And it was basically one of those, if you've ever been in a lawsuit, whatever, but it was, if you've ever sold a house, you might be entitled to compensation because of this lawsuit. It was so misleading. It didn't give any information as to why or how, but it kind of inferred that if you sold your house and paid your agent, you could make money. And I think that is, I mean, it's so misleading to me. And it is our responsibility to absolutely educate people that, this is the way it's always been. You're not just paying me, you're paying. If you haven't been doing that as an agent, then yeah, you are definitely liable. But the other thing too is I think as agents, we've always tried to make it look easy, make the transaction smooth as possible. So we don't share and aren't transparent about all the things we do, every aspect along the way that we're negotiating on their behalf, protecting them. I think now more than ever, we need to be very transparent and say, hey, these are all the things I'm going to be doing for you, not just before and during, but also after. Once the house is closed, you don't lose me as your realtor. Yeah. This is how hard I work for you. And this is why I deserve to be paid what you think I.
Well, it's like having processes and things that facilitate ease of operation, to one, that make you the professional that you are, two, lead to the experience, the buying or selling experience for the consumer, and then you're being chastised for that, right? Like it's just crazy. I heard, and social media doesn't help either. I mean, our industry, we probably put too much of the happy hours and the networking and the mixers and the events out on blast, as opposed to going, oh, well, in my 2 years of chairing the Cantry Committee, we raised $160,000 for the Salvation Army of Sacramento. All anybody saw were the events and everybody smiling and have a good time. Where, I mean, $160,000 is pretty substantial. Right. The Salvation Army can.
Yeah. Every meeting you had at SAR and every phone call you made and that.
Absolutely.
Like, you're like, to Kaelee's point, you're not showing that, which, people need to see.
Yeah.
And like, I'll probably butcher this story, but it was such a well told story where you work with a professional, whether it's a lawyer or anybody else, you're not paying for the 7 hours that you can track where you were shown houses and the offer was written. You're paying for the 20 years of experience or 10 years of experience, like for the 7 years that Kaelee, like did all this work behind the scenes to add value to a buyer. At that time it was Real Estate Agent Partners. That's what the consumer is paying for.
All those potholes that you didn't hit because the driver subtly maneuvered around them and you never even knew they were there.
These are some Danisms. Like he is just full of.
You got to look up this story that I can't remember. It's basically like a guy who came with a hammer and he tapped on something and he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to charge me $12,000?" And he's like, "You're paying me because I knew where to tap and how hard to tap." Right. And so that's the thing with real estate agents. I would love to hear from your point of view, Kaelee. Like, what are some things you didn't expect? Because now that you're in the game, right? You were part of the game, but you were, not necessarily in the game. Now that you're in the game as a real estate agent, what are some things like, I didn't realize this? I've got newfound respect for agents for this reason.
I think the great thing about being in title and escrow is that you see so many things because we're handling thousands of transactions every day. And so you get to see things that you're like, holy cow, I have never expected that. So I think going into it, there was very little that I thought would surprise me. But one thing that I have been surprised about is the lack of professionalism from some people in this industry who really put their ego first and their pride first and will snap at you, yell at you, cuss at you. And it's like, why are we treating each other like children? And so disrespectfully, first of all, we are here with the same goal. You want your client to buy or sell, and I want my client to buy or sell. So let's stop acting like children and let's talk like professionals and really find a way over whatever you're upset about right now. But it is crazy how many stories I have heard. I thankfully have not experienced that yet, but I've been hearing more and more stories about the way people treat each other in this industry. And it blows my mind. It really does, because it's like sooner or later, you're going to have to work with that person again. Maybe they're the one who's going to be, you're trying to get your buyer's offer accepted. Do you really want to have to tell your buyer like, hey, we didn't get our offer accepted because I acted like an asshat last time.
Right.
And they didn't want to work with me again.
Yeah. Well, how much do you think of that is driven right now by how challenging this market is? I mean, there's so many agents and lenders and everybody in our profession is grinding so hard or struggling. We don't necessarily know what's going on in their lives. I mean, but if you haven't closed a deal and you were burning it a little too hot and you ain't got no money left, you know, that desperation can change the way that you act in certain situations. So I always try and like give the benefit of the doubt and, you know, the subtle reminders, hey, we want to help you we want to help you get to the finish line on this thing, or we want to work together and get to the and then we can, after that, we can go back and look and see what happened and where we stubbed our toe.
Man, if you just gave him that tone too, just calm him down.
It's just the late night DJ voice.
Yeah,
it works every time.
Like, I was thinking of these stories where agents are just like, I repeat, per my last email, like I freaking told you. And then Dan's like, we're trying to get better every day, guys. Let's just calm down. You just
my inner Lundquist right there.
Shout out to Ryan Lundquist. He's feeling better. He's healthy. He's going to be back. He's going to be on.
He
the
was
pod
our first
soon.
guest on Open the Gate. So I'm a huge fan of Ryan. And
Sacramento
so
legend, SacramentoAppraisalblog.com.
So glad to
There's
hear
nobody who can
better.
quite make like data interesting and exciting and entertaining like he does. He's a special gem that we are lucky. We should protect him at all costs.
Yeah. So his thing is data. People know him for data and just being, you know, an absolute gem, like you said, in the real estate community. I'm curious, you might not know the answer yet, but I'm thinking about you and your real estate career. What is your thing? Do you have a thing yet where you're just like, this is what I'm known for, this is my specialty?
Yeah, I don't have that thing yet.
You had that thing. Title.
I did have that thing in title. No, I'm still discovering that. I think, you know, I really do love working with buyers. There is something that is so incredible about the moment that I get to hand keys over to that buyer. Even if they have bought before, it is so special and it's so emotional. And I love to be a part of that sentimental memory for people. But I don't think that I want to be just a buyer's agent. I want to be a tool for all. I think honestly, my thing is being so well educated with the title and escrow side that I can really explain and anticipate situations like with trusts and how we can overcome hurdles that will definitely come up based off the way that title is held. I think there's a lot of preemptive work I can do and explain for people that most realtors, even if they've been in the business 10 years, haven't gotten the experience with. And so I think in that sense, that's kind of my thing. But no, that was a good question. I really don't know yet.
Yeah. It's always interesting too, because as you're saying that, I think to myself, oh yeah, you know, you're a part of thousands of transactions on the title side. So like, you're gonna be able to educate people. I've got a great agent friend who was an appraiser for 10 years. So it's like, she can really just explain value and what an appraiser is going to look at and what that's going to be. And so, yeah, that's interesting to know, because, you know, when you said it out loud, I thought to myself, I wish more agents felt like this. You're just like, I love being able to educate people.
Yeah.
Right now, when it's as scary as ever, affordability we brought up, which we don't have to, you know, dive deep in because it's been beaten to death. But, you know, the best medicine, I think, for people when they're uncertain or scared is to educate.
Yeah.
You know, on my side with mortgage, they're like, oh my gosh, like people don't like to talk about their finances. People don't want to think about, you know, their budget or any of that stuff. And to be able to say, listen, let's look at it.
Yeah.
At 600,000, if you put 5% down, here's what the numbers are, 10% down. And, you know, you can think about this over the weekend. You can talk to your spouse. You can, does $3,800 fit in the budget or not? Like, that's my thing, I think, is empowering people through education. And, you know, to a certain extent, you know, that's what sounds like
I've always been
doing.
amazed with like the really, really good lenders, their ability to say you've got your budget's at $10,000 cash in hand, and that's what you've got. And figuring out 5 or 7 or 10 different ways to utilize that same amount of money in so many different fashions and come out with a different payment at the end of the deal, right?
Right.
Because I mean, I've always joked, like when people, I laugh when people say, well, people don't really buy houses; they buy a mortgage payment they can afford.
Yeah.
And I still, you know, I want to be that guy, you know, prove me wrong or whatever with the sign out. I mean, because I really do. I mean, I think my wife and I bought 4 houses, and it always comes down to what can you afford?
Yeah, what can you afford
at the end of the month?
Yeah, and I think too that speaks to, you know, as you guys were talking about, you know, industry infighting and all this stuff. At the end of the day, it's like, man, it takes all of us coming together.
Same team.
You know, I think the industry needs to hear this. There's some good loud voices that I'm listening to right now. I choose to listen to the positive voices that are trying to say, hey, listen, like, let's all level up together. It's going to help all of us if we all, you know, are coming together to hold buyers' hands in a time where, we can't be infighting and upset, and, realtors mad at lender's like, well, title freaking screwed up on the fees.
I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, as the termite guy for the last 12 years, it is so nice to not be the bad guy in every single transaction. Oh yeah, we put price tags on our repair bids like we were the bad guy for a long time. Oh, your $10,000 blew up our deal, and we're like, well, hold on a second. If they would have done some homeowner maintenance, it wouldn't have been 10 grand.
Right.
But yeah. So, anyways, I digress.
I mean, there's so many different places to place the blame. We can go termite.
Oh yeah.
We can go appraiser. We can blame it on the real estate agent. Honestly, though, like that's something that, gosh darn it, people need to hear, dude. Like, stop fighting amongst yourselves. Like, and this is where, like, this new ruling, because people don't understand it, and generally speaking, when people are upset, I'm like, no, it's not. They're not mad at me. They're afraid, or they're uncertain, or they just don't know, and so they're upset. But like, I've seen some of the like back and forth on counters, and like I saw a counter back, which I happened to be CC'd on, where the seller was offended that the buyer asked for the seller to pay buy side commission. I'm like, was it just last week where this was like 100% of deals?
Yeah.
And now you're acting like it's the most ridiculous request of all time to have an addendum where your seller pays, which, again, we can beat this thing into the ground. It's always been negotiable.
Yeah.
It always should be for a seller about net, what they get.
Mm-hmm.
Who freaking cares?
Yeah.
2.5%, 3%, 19%. Like, if you get the net you're looking to net, like, that is the listing agent's responsibility. Get my seller the highest net.
I think a lot of those initial ones that got set up like that, though, that was how that listing may have been won. And so now that listing agent's like, oh no, I've got to stand my ground to represent my seller, because I told them that they weren't going to have to pay a commission to the buyer side representation. I feel like that there might have been an immediate kind of knee-jerk reaction where that was probably how some listings were won.
For sure.
I want to get into real estate for this reason.
Yeah.
To be able to sit with that seller and show this agent who obviously can't communicate it, Mr. Seller, we agreed that no buy side commission. Great. Yeah. $600,000 was the price you wanted. Yep. Minus 3% to me equals $582. What if we brought you a buyer at $630 and you paid me 3% and the buy side 3%? And so that 6% netted you. Can't do it. I'm good at math.
More money than the
number guy.
Yeah. Do you want 582 or 595?
There's no room for the abacus on the table.
It's a principle thing, though, right? It's like,
sure.
I'm not going to pay because I don't have to anymore.
Right.
Like, your goal is to net the most money.
And that's where the professional and the creativity and the experience all come into play.
Common friggin' sense.
This is so new, but this situation's also so new.
He's calming us down right now. I'm getting fired up.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
You're all adjusting in your chair, getting me fired up.
That's all puffed
Dan's
up.
like, come on, guys.
Guys.
We need your voice. We need your voice. No, I think honestly, one of the hardest aspects of this industry is that the common person, right? Everyone's a real estate expert. They see something on the news, they hear something, they read something about rates, and suddenly they know what's going on in the industry. They see that, there was a lawsuit about sellers paying buyers agents, and now they don't have to pay that. So we really need to overcome that preconceived notion of they already know and help them understand, hey, this is how it's always been. Really explain the benefit to them of, without, it's a sensitive topic right now because it is kind of a fine line between steering and educating. It's still a little fresh. Yeah, it's still very fresh. But, I think a good agent is going to be able to explain why it's always been a good benefit to the seller, and that, and maybe the other thing is too, like, okay, say you don't want to pay broker's fees. Great. Every offer I have here for you is asking you to pay that. Right. So are you going to not sell your house because you don't want to pay that fee? Are we going to negotiate down? There has to be some sort of compromise. And I think for the most part, most sellers, from what I'm hearing, are still totally understanding that it's in their best benefit to participate.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a communication thing. I think that great agents are able to communicate why. And then the seller goes, oh, you know what? At first I thought I was going to save, but now that you've explained it to me, I realize like I'm doing that to net myself the most. So it's
especially in our market. I mean, just remind people, hey, by the way, we live in California. Like it's probably not going to follow the national narrative.
Right.
The way we're doing it, the way it needs to be done is probably going to be a little different than the way they're doing it in Arkansas or Alabama.
What are you seeing on your side from the pest side? Is there anything that's changing for you guys?
You know, we saw just the volume slow down as they transition. You know, this end of summer, school's going back in, and then it was like that NAR thing hit, and it was like we saw 2 weeks where it was like, oh goodness, there was definitely something that
pause.
There was definitely something that slowed activity down. And then we had the short week last week, which we actually booked more inspections in a 4-day work week last week than we did the week prior to that. So that was a good indication that, okay, like the dust is settling, and, you know, maybe we're still in primarily a need-based market. You don't see a lot of people moving this time of year just because they want to move.
Right.
You know, it's the 4 or 7 Ds. I don't know how many Ds we
like
have.
6 or
There's
9.
so many
There's
Ds.
a lot of Ds.
Diapers
All
and
the Ds.
diamonds and divorce.
But whatever
death,
those reasons that really make people need to move are still kind of what's driving this market right now, and it's very similar to what we saw last winter.
Right.
Which means, you know, there's probably a little more tension in those transactions on both sides. I feel like we're seeing way more contingent sales, which obviously, and my wife and I have done a couple of those, and I mean, those just make the process so painful, and just, you know, when you're just so dependent on so many dominoes falling just right,
it's brutal.
It adds anxiety, which you know, which just doesn't make it nearly as fun. You know, which
excited you're buying a house. You got 3 kids, 2 jobs, a house you're selling, a house you're buying.
Termite guy's about to say.
Like, quell your anxieties. It's good luck. It's not an easy balancing act.
So I think. Yeah, for us, I mean, and again, I always try and step back, take a breath, and go, okay, understand the situation, understand. I feel like we have these conversations in our meetings and just around the industry, and it mixes things like that. We talk about it all the time. Like, we forget almost when there's people who don't do this every day of their lives, how much more stressful that can be for them and on them. I try and really remind my inspectors, the home and the termite guys, that all the time. You guys, we see termites all the time. Like 95% of the people that you interact with when we find termites on their property are not going to be nearly as casual.
They think they're going to burn the house down.
Yeah,
like, oh
right.
God,
Yeah, exactly. So
deal's dead. Gotta walk away.
Yeah. But again, going back to that experience and being able to have those conversations and calm those people down and say, guys, this is not the end of the world. This isn't the deal breaker. We can work through this.
Right.
Really.
Yeah. I literally had one of those like epiphanies last week, which probably have once a week or once a month at the very least.
Once a day for some of us.
But I left the title company, and somebody I've known since I was a kid, buying his first house. Been talking to him for 6 years about buying a house. He finally did it. He was so mortified the whole time, shaking. And a grown man at 40 years old, right? And I came back to the office and I said, you know what? Like, I've done this 1,400 times.
Yeah.
So every deal is like, oh, piece of cake. You got W-2 income. Like, it's going to be easy for you. You got a great agent. They're going to negotiate, you know, everything on your behalf. And there's nothing tricky at all about this deal. It's a vanilla plain deal. To that buyer. It's life-changing. First time they've ever bought, and it's so huge. And so I think that that's something that a lot of us forget too. And I keep harping on this point, but I think it's important. Like, we've got to be the professionals that are the calm in this storm of emotion and whatnot, to where it's like, got a couple agents. Let's work together. You know, your seller is stressed out because they're already in escrow in Tennessee. The buyer's stressed out because they're a first-time home buyer. $3,600 feels like a lot. And so, you know, they're uncertain. And so, you know, as the professionals, it's our job, and that's why we get paid. That's why we're making commissions, is because we're, you know, steering this big ship together to make sure that, you know, everybody has a great experience as possible.
I think to that point, though, that anxiety experience for our clients is exactly the reason why we've tried to kind of underplay all that we do, because, you know, we feel like the more we tell them, the more they're overwhelmed. And I think that there's a way we can present it as, hey, you know, these are all the things that we're going to come across, and I've got you. Like, I have done this so many times. My goal is to make this as easy and as smooth and as enjoyable as possible, if that is an option for you, you know, but I need you to know that every step of the way, and there's going to be a lot of steps, like, I've got your back. So it's going to be, it's just a new way of communicating what we do and how we protect our people, and not just protect, but carry them through and make sure that they're not like riddled with anxiety to commit to buying a house at 40 years old.
Realtor, counselor, all
they
those
can't have a
other
heart
things.
attack before they get to the signing table. That's bad for business.
Yeah, you made it. Yeah, I've been have to check in on him this week.
Yeah.
Make sure he got his keys, moved in.
Your
He's
blood
doing
pressure
I've
is doing
actually
well.
literally seen a heart attack at the signing table. It was the escrow officer. It wasn't the client, but that was a whole nother story.
Yeah, so you've been an escrow. You've been part of Thousands Trend. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
some of what's the craziest thing you've seen on that side.
Oh my God. Oh man, there's some really interesting stories. One of them, I love the ones with like the disappearing spouse. Like this one lady wanted to sell her house. Her and her husband had bought it with less than a year ago. They were doing some improvements on it, and then all of a sudden her husband disappeared. Couldn't see him, couldn't find him. She wanted to sell the house all of a sudden too. It was very fishy. But you can't, if you're married, you can't sell without your spouse's signature. And so there was this whole investigation process. But actually, one of the more interesting ones I saw was,
It's like the bizarre,
I gotta know,
it's like
was
the,
he found?
It's the bizarro
No,
Lacey
he's
Peterson,
never
you
met.
know?
Yeah, it was very interesting. And obviously she's guilty.
My wife watches a lot of true crime. My wife's gonna be like, I gotta find out what
I'm
happened.
like, oh, he suspiciously
There's
disappeared,
all-
right? Yeah.
In sales, there's clients that you want your competition to have.
I've got a new boyfriend that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
My husband's missing. It's no big deal. Yeah.
Stop asking about that.
Can he?
He went
Can,
fishing.
Just move on already.
power of attorney. My new boyfriend could sign for him. It's interspousals fine.
So there was a guy who won his house in a poker game in the early 1900s, which was very interesting. And then,
Sweet.
won it in a poker game,
established a tax
super old
basis on
fashioned. And then he, at some point, had put like a wife or a friend, a woman on title. And then, several generations later, this man's, grandchildren essentially are trying to sell the house, but they never removed that lady from title. And so
It's always a woman.
we
man. Always a woman.
had to like track down heirs of this woman to see, obviously like her heirs still have claim to the property because her interest is still there. So we had to like track back generations of people. I literally was calling, I have a cousin who was Secret Service for a long time. So I'm like calling him, like, I need you to find this name. Like, who do you, like, what relatives do you know? We got to get this deal closed.
She married Doyle Brunson. He won a house.
Like, not related to this man on title, last known address here. It was crazy though. It's so wild to me how, kind of careless people are with their title in terms of like, oh yeah, I'll just throw you on, or we're business partners, or we're family, or whatever. But it's like, they don't realize the full implications down the road of the debt they're taking on, or how difficult it might be if somebody dies. Like, it was just, that was a fun one.
Yeah.
Won it in a poker game. I'm like,
Right.
God, we really are the Wild West sometimes.
Amazing. Yeah. Out here in California.
Ashley Haney told us on one of the early episodes of Open the Gate about how one of her clients had willed the home to her cats.
Oh, I've heard
And
this.
they had to figure out how to get the cats off title and get it into the.
Sorry, I'm not laughing.
into an actual-
How's the cat going to sign off on that? Like,
yeah,
oh,
it's
right
like
here,
never
please.
a dull moment, right? I mean, I'm sure in that moment, it's probably the most stressful, anxious moment of your career. And then, but you get it closed, and you're like,
who holds title again?
you're like, hey, no one else is.
Yeah.
I bet you there's a very small population that can
I could
say
probably
they've done
refer
that.
you to a good lawyer, though. Like, she should have had in her trust somebody who could care for those cats.
Yes.
And maybe give it to the human who could.
People do weird
Sign.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
People do weird things
So
to their
weird.
home. We say it all the time.
So
And
weird.
The home inspectors come up on some wild stuff too.
I want to hear some of your
Oh,
wild
I know. I'm
stories.
like, we should hear his stories because
Oh,
he's going in the house.
I
They
mean,
get to
I
see the
haven't
dirty
been going
laundry,
in the
so to
house
speak.
for a while.
You might have found that
my
husband that was
first
missing under one of the
my
houses.
first couple weeks when I was licensed, when I was doing termite, I ran into a couple. I mean, you run into some petrified cats underneath houses and stuff like that. My two best, both did occur underneath the house. One, we were in like North Highlands, and I was going underneath this one. This is like the HUD REO days, so this house had been vacant for probably a couple years, and water had been off and all that. Well, I go crawling into the sub area, and only to find that there was a skunk that had inhabited the sub area, and sub areas don't have like two entrance and exit points. So I was going in, and the skunk was going counter commute. And it took everything I had in my body to not make sure that I did not turn my head to see him go out, because you know how skunks operate, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
the tail goes up and they spray, you don't want to be
underneath there too.
Facing that.
Yeah, so
you're basically in a hot box.
Thank
with
goodness, thank God, like it did not spray. I did have a minor heart attack. I thought I was going to die in that sub area. It was probably the highest heart rate I've ever registered.
I feel like still
my
Dan in
entire
that
life.
situation would be late night DJing voice the skunk, like you're okay.
No,
you're
I would
gonna
just
make
go
it
ahead.
out.
You're
I would
gonna
go
walk
right
right
will
past
stay
me.
Because
here.
you're wearing,
You
like,
pass out.
this was pre-COVID, like, you know, you're wearing a mask and, you know, you got goggles and protective gear on and stuff. It was my heart's like elevating a little bit right now,
PTSD,
just recalling
the
the
it.
traumas
You're
are
okay, Dan.
surfacing.
That one, I mean, so that one was probably the most entertaining crawl space experience. I had another one where I went to crawl in. I looked to my right, and there were like multiple bags of what I would perceive to have been cocaine at the time. And so I just backed out and said, "Yeah, I'm not going in there." I told the agent. I
They
said,
taped him under the house.
"No, they were just sitting there. There was like a little table that basically, so that was obviously where they were hiding them or keeping them.
Wow.
You know, the separate. I don't know how the drug dealers work, but
I haven't heard of that.
on the TV shows, they always keep them, you know, off their person so that you don't
Right.
get
Yeah, under the house.
so,
yeah.
under the house. Yeah, that's a new one for me.
But that one's but that one it was a little odd. I just backed out and said I can't go under there because if whoever owns those comes looking for them,
Right. I don't want to be down
I
there.
don't need to be here.
Yeah.
And-
Last
and-
we saw
yeah.
them, there was a guy with a green hat crawling under here.
Yeah. So I said, hey, get that taken care of, and I'll come back. I won't even charge you to come back. But
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going in there at this point.
Smart move.
Good,
Smart move.
good times in real estate. Good times in real estate. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. Before we end it, I always like to talk to people about like what they see, you know, the future of any given industry. Like we talk about real estate, we talk about pest, just because it's interesting to think about, right? Like what is this going to look like once this settlement calms down? You know, in my industry for sure, there's like so much technology being injected that, you know, if nothing else, interesting to think about. But what do you think, Kaelee, real estate looks like in 5 years in general? And then for you specific, like what's your business going to look like in 5 years?
I think honestly, in 5 years, you know, there's going to be agents that are new to the industry and are like, you guys used to work without an agreement with the buyer? Like, that's crazy, you know? And it does kind of sound crazy. Like, there's a reason why it was such a risk because people would lose deals because there was no tie. There was no contract binding a partnership between myself and a buyer. So I think it's going to become so much more normalized. And in fact, it's going to increase the value of buyers agents generally. For me personally, I'm just going to be kicking ass, taking names, you know, helping people buy and sell and I don't know, investing more. We have one rental property, so hopefully we'll like quadruple that in 5 years. And yeah,
I like it.
Just living and working hard and playing even harder.
Nice. Getting better every day.
Better every day. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for in the inspection world, it's a really hard question because, and I've talked about this a lot lately, but as the world seems to spin faster, I don't know necessarily how we speed up the inspection process. It still is, and in my opinion, always should be a very analog process in a digital world.
Yeah.
You know, and Rocket Mortgage, when they did the push button get mortgage, like I'm always like, you can't push button inspect home.
I pray to God we never have AI inspecting homes.
And it's really hard though because like our business cycles with the volume of the market, which is typically high volume in the spring and summer, and then you start waning off and slowing down through the fall and winter. So what happens with us is a lot of times we'll lose opportunities in the summer because I only have so many inspectors who can do so many inspections a day. And there's, you know, from the business management side of that, you know, we have to be mindful that we need to be able to have enough guys to sustain the business in the spring and summertime, but we also need to have few enough guys that we can sustain them
right
in the fall and the winter seasons, because they need to work, and we understand that. So that's a really hard part. I don't really even know how to answer it. I mean, obviously, the technology will support it. We'll have clearer pictures. We'll have more megabytes to input data in the reports and things like that. But yeah, I don't see AI moving massively into our space. Even WDO termite stuff is fairly unique to California. Not every state utilizes that, and we actually fall underneath the Board of Agriculture in the state of California. So that's who governs us. They're pretty interested in, you know, what we're pumping into the ground and, chemical wise and stuff like that. So for myself, I mean, I would love to continue having a flourishing business with a bunch of really good relationships with people that I love to work with.
A flourishing podcast with an amazing
exactly. Millions of followers on iTunes and Spotify. Maybe it goes in the black.
Best of luck to you. I'll let you know when I get there. I'll let you know what that looks like as soon as that time comes.
Tell us how it looks.
For now, it's a passion project, right?
Our first commercial read for Roberto's Taqueria. Live read on the air.
Today's podcast is sponsored by.
I'll sling tacos so hard.
Yeah, we'll be kicking the Kelsey brothers out of the top spot on iTunes. What did they just sell for? 100 million. 100 million.
I mean, getting better every day is right there.
Yeah, you're close. I'm sure.
You guys are right there as well.
I mean, this is a huge step up for us. I mean, we're gonna 5,000x our listeners on this one.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you for having us. It's been a blast.
That's a wrap.